So hello and welcome to today's video, where today upon a semi-popular request I'm going to be covering the Bully Iceberg chart, a bit later than requested because I'm way ahead of schedule on most of my videos. Now before I begin I do need to clarify a few things. A couple of the Iceberg listings here are a bit too similar to one another, so I merged them together to avoid repeating myself multiple times. The ones I merged together were UFOs, Aliens and Crashed UFO on the Asylum, In Coma and Purgatory, Gary Smith as a Werewolf and Werewolves, Jimmy is James Earl Cash, Manhunt is Bully 2, and Jimmy is the real Bully. Secondly, some of these entries do have multiple meanings, so I'll be going over some of my thoughts on what they mean, or the more interesting ones. Thirdly, be sure to check the description for timestamps, and fourthly, some of the topics featured in today's video I've covered before. So let's get on to the first tier, and let's begin with Mr. Burton. Now Mr. Burton is a very odd character in Bully, because he's very heavily implied to be a paedophile. Zoe Taylor tells Jimmy she left Werewolf because Mr. Burton was flirting with her. And let's not forget that when Jimmy runs into Mr. Burton outside Come Hit Her, you know, the local adult entertainment store, Mr. Burton flat out asks Jimmy to steal all the girls' underwear from their dorms. Now keep in mind the girls in Bully are all assumed to be any age between 12 and 17. And Mr. Burton is clearly at least double their age at the bare minimum if we're talking about the 17-year-olds. And that's being very polite. He does get fired after Jimmy defeats Gary, but even though he still gets fired, he still teaches gym class, and it's rumoured that Mr. Burton might have some dirt on Crabblesnitch to keep himself employed at the academy. Actually, Zoe Taylor mentioned she got expelled from Wolf Academy for bringing up the Mr. Burton incidents, but Dr. Crabblesnitch doesn't remember this, nor does he object to Mr. Burton's firing when Jimmy brings it up. So maybe this was before Crabblesnitch became principal? Or is he just playing dumb? The flashlight. Now the flashlight is one of the very few weapons in the game Jimmy can never obtain without the use of modding. It is only seen on police officers and prefects at night time, after curfew, or when patrolling the empty school halls. If Jimmy equips the flashlight via modding, he cannot fight, he cannot punch, all he can do is just walk and look up and down. Flashing somebody has no effect whatsoever. With the light I mean, not actual flashing, don't do that, that's illegal. But the flashlight was going to be attainable via a cut cheat code, so who knows what it was going to be used for. The Freakshow. If you head to the Freakshow at the carnival, find the Skeleton Man. Equip your camera or super slingshot and zoom into the picture behind him. Now one of the people you can see appears to bear some resemblance to the strange man from Red Dead Redemption. Now if you've not played the first Red Dead, well, Redemption anyway, the strange man is very heavily implied to be a supernatural being, haunting John Marston in both Red Dead Redemption 1 during the I Know You side missions. In the I Know You side quests, this strange man knows all about John. He knows his name, he knows his past, and in Red Dead Redemption 2, there's an entire Easter egg dedicated to this strange man. Now during the final portion of the I Know You side quest from the first Red Dead, the final encounter with him takes place over John's future grave, where he remarks about this being a fine spot, while being incredibly cryptic, before walking off calmly as John empties 3 bullets into him, which seemingly do no harm to him, and many in the Red Dead community assume seal John's, Abigail's and Uncle's fate for the grave. Now in the myth community, there are many theories to what this man is, some arguing he's deaf, others believing he could be the devil, God or Saint Peter. Now going back to Bully, the Skeleton Man in his younger years was born into a very wealthy family, and one day, out of nowhere, he started losing weight explicitly. No medical facility ever found out what caused his strange weight loss. Now the main theory for this could be that his parents, or possibly even this man himself, may have made a pact with the devil to stay filthy rich, but knowing how deals with the devil work, this caused the man to lose all of those that he loved, as in his dialogue he mentions how his family and friends all left him and he's even shunned by the medical facility he was at, essentially forcing him to join the only group of people that would welcome him, a touring freak show, where he now spends his life on display to be gawped at by onlookers, which is a very fitting punishment for such a greedy pact. Now going back to the theories about the strange man again, in Red Dead Redemption 2, Armadillo has a breakout of cholera, and Herbert Moon is seemingly one of the very few people unaffected, which hints that Herbert is very lucky. However, if we decide to enter his store, we can see he has a portrait of the strange man behind him, and if questioned about it by John, he brushes it off quickly, saying that he really liked the portrait and it was given to him. If we go to speak to some of the residents, they will actually say that the man responsible for this outbreak had a top hat, a moustache and a black suit, matching the strange man's appearance. And given the Skeleton Man's incredibly sad and arguably cursed backstory, coupled with the strange man being seen as some kind of supernatural entity, the theory is the strange man may have had something to do with the Skeleton Man at the carnival. It's entirely possible that, given in Red Dead Redemption 2, it's heavily implied that Herbert Moon, the local racist shopkeeper, may have made some pact with him. So could the strange man be some kind of supernatural deity who brings grave misfortune to those he deals with? It's very possible. And the last one of the first tier, the Hobo Abduction. The most definitive and infamous proof of alien life existing in the Buddy universe comes from the hobo behind the school bus. Now we first meet him in A Little Help, where he tasks us with getting him radio transistors in exchange for fighting moves. But after collecting all 6 radio transistors and giving them back to him, this happens.
Take this!
Now this was actually an incredibly massive cutscene because it's the first time Rockstar have ever shown something of this calibre in their games before. Also, this mysterious beam of light will remain here until the player goes indoors. It's impossible to see where this beam of light goes to as well, as the actual source is blocked off entirely by clouds. Now, ever since Buddy came out, fans have been wondering what kind of secret this beam of light actually holds, and if it's possible to interact with this light somehow and get some kind of secret, which is actually impossible to do because Hobo's training area is locked off at all times. Now sadly, none of these are true, unsurprisingly, as if you use mods or a BMX glitch to get into the Hobo's area, you'll see that it doesn't really do anything, it's just a light source sadly. And by using mods, if we climb up, the light source does not even reveal a UFO, and unlike Super Mario 64, Jimmy doesn't get a flying cap either. But even though that this part was fake, this does raise a lot of questions. What does the Hobo know about the aliens? How did he contact them? What happened to him afterwards? Because of all this, the Hobo is definitely a very interesting character. He never did tell Jimmy what he wanted them for. So onto the second tier now, and let's begin with the church. If you head to the church in Old Vale at any time during the day or the night, you can overhear a sermon being given by an unseen reverend. The longer you stay here, the more you can hear, though it may loop at some points before changing suddenly. Some people have overheard this preacher mentioning stuff about the apocalypse and the end of humanity. Let's give it a quick listen.
Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight and was full of violence. God saw how corrupt the earth had become, for all the people on earth had corrupted their ways. And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring, and here he will crush your head, and you will strike his head. Then the man and his wife heard the sound of the Lord God as he was walking in the garden in the cool of the day. And they hid from the Lord God among the trees in the garden. But the Lord God called to the man, "Where are you?"
Now the sermon being given is from Genesis 3. I believe the Reverend is reading out the fall, as he does mention Adam and Eve and people like Noah as well. The weird thing is, the Reverend has an entire sermon lasting just about 10 minutes in the game's files. However, most of it goes completely unused because nobody's going to stand outside this church for about 10 minutes straight just listening to this repeating over itself again. Dr. Crabblesnitch's first name. Now in Buddy we don't actually know many of the faculty's first names, with the exception of Miss Delano Galloway, Ms. Deirdre Phillips, and Edna. And Dr. Crabblesnitch of course is no exception. Much like during our school years we don't know all our teachers' first names. But did you know in some copies of the Buddy PS2 instruction manual, his first name is revealed, and his first name is revealed to be Ralph. Now this might be an oversight, as his first name is never mentioned in game at all, and his voice actor is Ralph Gunderman, so this may or may not be canonical. That being said, Rockstar have had a lot of oversights with characters' names, especially on promo materials such as Ted Thompson being listed as Ted Sinclair, Tad Spencer being named Tad Smith Altthorpe Smith, and Biff Taylor being named Biff Tremblay. The Safehouse eerie feeling. Now every single Safehouse except the boys' dorm has a rather eerie feeling to it, like you're the only other person who's in here, and once you smash that radio there's this real off-putting silence. As usual, background music is just muted and there's no ambience either. It's weird, in fact the only Safehouse that doesn't do this is the boys' dorm, but for some strange reason the entire boys' dorm is just one massive mess. For a starter, it's half the size of the girls' dorm, despite housing about 50 more students of the male gender, and as expected everybody has to share a room, except Jimmy, who for some reason has an entire room to himself. And Jimmy's room is bigger than every other dorm room too, and nobody else ever acknowledges its existence even when Jimmy's being chased. And this is partially explained by cut content, as during Buddy's development the boys' dorm did actually have 2 floors, there were going to be many more rooms, and Jimmy's room was going to be stationed on the 2nd floor towards the back. The school basement, also known as the Hole. And one of the very first things that makes the basement stand out is the geography of the interior compared to the exterior. And this is something I did point out during my Beta Wolf Academy video which I made some years ago where I said this. But anyway, if we go inside the basement and look to our right, we have this massive shutter which is, well, which just appears out of nowhere. Now I'm really confused as to why this is here. I mean, when you look on the exterior, there's only, you know, some stairs, but here there seems to be stairs and like a little garage kind of. Anyway, that's the first major hint that the basement isn't what it seems, and we do know that going off concept artwork and the official beta model of the academy, we can see the school was going to be a bit more flat, I guess you could say. So my theory of this possibly being connected to the parking lot doesn't seem that far-fetched. Now the further you explore the basement, it just becomes completely silent except for ambience and gives people a really eerie feeling, like you're not supposed to be down here at all. Now there is actually a reason for this, and it's supposedly to do with the school's janitor, Mr. Luntz, who himself has a lot of cut content surrounding him. Anyway, during development it's said that after 7 PM, Mr. Luntz would pack up shop and go and reside in the basement for the rest of the evening, which is why he's nowhere to be found after the school closes. But that's not all. Now I believe, but have no proof, but believe there was going to be some secret Rockstar had for him. Now, in the buddy community, people do have a theory that Mr. Luntz is hiding something, because of his incredibly off-putting dialogue, mentioning how Dr. Crabblesnitch doesn't know what he's up to, and he's also mentioning how people should be kept in chains in the basement, which is backed further by a film being shown at Bald Fail Cinema, titled Creepy Janitor, which, oddly enough, has his face. Now sadly, nothing ever really comes of this. But one of the pieces of cut content surrounding Mr. Luntz I do have is his concept art. Yeah, imagine just sneaking into the basement during your first playthrough of the game and encountering that at midnight. Now one of the reasons this was most likely cut was due to either not enough time to finish his script, or maybe he was removed because Jimmy could just come down here and beat up Mr. Luntz without any consequences whatsoever. Happy Vault's Asylum. Unlocked in Chapter 4, Happy Vault's Asylum is stationed at the southeast edge of the map, located between Bulworth Academy and Blue Skies Industrial Park. However, when we set foot inside Happy Vaults, the light-hearted humour and charm of Bully quickly disappears and is instead replaced with a very sinister and evil kind of vibe, where we can hear somebody possibly being tortured as we hear his screams alongside various drill noises. But here's the thing, the asylum houses no inmates at all. Upon entering the asylum, we hear an incredibly unsettling sound, a man screaming with the sounds of drills. No inmates are seen inside the asylum, outside of the missions Finding Johnny Vincent and Galloway Away. No matter where we go, we cannot find anybody aside from Theo the Orderly, and he's not carrying a drill. Now many people wonder why this is. Could it be ghosts, or could it just be something else? The reason for this is because during development there was plans to have asylum inmates inside their cells, but this was removed for unknown reasons. And there's also a rumour that the inmates would have patrolled the asylum grounds too during certain times, but there's nothing to confirm that either. Now there's quite a load of unused audio files for the inmates too, which actually back this theory up, many of whom actually appear to be cut characters, and others who are actually townsfolk that we can actually find around town. I'll play a small few now.
Please don't take away my blue goose, he's my only friend! So you put one small helping of seafood in your shoes, and they put you in a madhouse! Where is the justice in that?
Man, I've been here for 12 years! I wonder if anyone forgot about me!
It's the monkey dance! It's the monkey dance! It's the wonderful monkey dance!
UFOs and Aliens. Now Happy Vault's Asylum itself is the birthplace of many buddy myths, including the ever so popular Werewolf. If we head to the back of the asylum, there are various x-rays on the wall, and while pretty much all of you may have seen these before, I'll keep it brief. The first one of a hunched over being is widely accepted to be a werewolf of sorts, while this one over here is widely accepted to be an alien. First of all, the neck shape is not human at all, and while it could be somebody with a body defect, it's definitely not human because of the shape of the skull. It's an abnormal shape, and the mouth being a bit too far away from the brain, if that makes any sense. Because of this, people started coming up with theories that Happy Vault's Asylum was harbouring an alien somewhere, but possibly the alien escaped, and some even theorised that maybe the alien was kept in the morgue, as we do have this strangely open door in the area which is never addressed. Although granted, it's a morgue, so it could just be somebody who has recently passed away and, yeah, you know, taken away for the funeral or something like that. Now, some theories were thrown around, but were quickly debunked, and these were that people claimed there was a crashed UFO on the roof of the asylum, which is how the Orderlies acquired an alien. But that was false, as nobody was ever intended to get on the roof of the asylum. So that was quickly thrown out and was debunked fully when people used mods to check the roof for themselves and discovered that, unsurprisingly, the roof was incomplete and there was no UFOs. But what if I told you there is a way you can see aliens in Bully without mods and without any nonsense Easter egg steps? Because, shockingly, you can. Sort of. Because in Bully Scholarship Edition only, not Anniversary Edition, not the PlayStation 2 version, in the multiplayer biology class, you have a very small chance of dissecting an alien, complete with the respective body parts named, well, something you'd expect to see in like sci-fi genre, and pretty much, yeah. So we do actually see aliens in Bully. The Haunted Mill. So what is the Haunted Mill and how did it become a myth? Well, first of all, the origins of the mystery can be traced back to an NPC by the name of McInnes, a dock worker who can be found around the Blue Skies Industrial Park area. And this McInnes character has a lot of interesting quotes regarding a supposed mill. Let's give them a quick listen.
You hear the tale of the paper mill? You know, the one about it being haunted? A good friend of mine said he saw some freaky-deaky stuff at the paper mill, said it reminded him of a big ball of slime or something. You hear about the paper mill? I heard it's got some strange stuff going on, like the graveyard, but worse. There's gotta be some clues. Maybe it was an old Indian burial ground or a pet cemetery?
So because McInnes lives in Blue Skies, it's very likely the mill he's talking about would be found around this area. But there is one major problem with this. That is, the mill that McInnes is on about is not present at all anywhere in the game's map. No matter where you go, even around the Red Star area, no such building exists. So what is McInnes on about? Well, first mystery is the mill itself. And luckily, this mystery is not hard to solve, but it is quite interesting, because in traditional Rockstar fashion, they left behind a hell of a lot of items that tell us all about this deleted mill area. First of all, in the game's files, specifically the Ambient files, there is audio for a sawmill. Yep, that's a sawmill alright, but do we know anything else? The answer to that of course is yes, because if we go to Blue Skies Industrial Park, specifically the small patch of land near the sea and Happy Vault's Asylum, we can see a puff of smoke that appears from absolutely nowhere just casually hanging out in the sky. Could this be the ghost that McInnes is on about? After all, I'm pretty sure if I saw something like that I would immediately assume it was some supernatural entity, but no, this isn't the ghost, but it does belong to the Beta Mill. So how do we know it's a mill? Well, thanks to Rockstar developer David Bynes' portfolio, which has full-on pictures of the mill, we can actually see that this matches up perfectly with the two previous bits of evidence. Note how the mill is stationed partially into the sea, much like the area in Blue Skies is. Secondly, the chimneys do seem to reach the exact same height as the mysterious blue sky smoke. And judging from quite a few other screenshots, it does look like that Jimmy was going to be able to visit this area, and even possibly go inside. Partially. As we do have another screenshot which shows a walkway that seemingly leads Jimmy up through a corridor-like area, and another screenshot which shows us a rather detailed area that is much more detailed than most other rooftop areas in the game. In fact, if we take a look at the back of this screenshot, we can see another dark area which matches up nicely with the same dark area from the front of the mill. So now we've actually proven the existence of the mill, let's return back to the ghost. And sadly, the myth of the ghost is proven pretty much fake, and this is mostly down to McInnes himself. So let's do a bit of investigating on him, because he's a rather interesting character. First of all, McInnes is a very minor character. His only role in the entire game is giving Jimmy a single errand and that's it. Nothing else. But McInnes is that much of a minor character, his voice actor was never even credited. And seeing as all his quotes reference this specific cut area, it's likely that the person who provided the voice did everything he needed to do while the game was still in development in say about early 2005 when the mill was still an area in the game, and Rockstar never bothered to either cut him as a character or get him back to re-record some new lines after the mill was removed. And for the last one, for the second tier, ambient noises. Now if you're unaware, in Bully, specifically around the New Coventry area, there's a supposed mystery of a crying baby that can be heard, and it can be heard around the tenements area. Some have attributed this to a ghost child, and others saying it's just for ambience. But the truth is one of the darkest things that remains inside Bully. This is not cut content and you can check it out for yourself. And you can hear this by heading to this area on the map and mute everything except for the sound effects. Turn off voices, turn off music, stand in this spot in particular, and I know many of you won't trust me when I say this, but turn your volume up. From 8 AM to 6 PM you'll just hear this. Now from 6 PM onward you'll start to hear this. Now if it's too quiet to hear, don't worry, because we're going to start digging through the game files. Now fittingly enough, the one of the baby crying is just called, well, Baby Cry 02. Fair enough. But what about the other files of the one of the woman screaming? Well, those files are called Domestic Fight 2, Domestic Fight 3 and Domestic Fight 1. Yes, domestic, not domestic. So let's give these a quick listen. Okay, so now on to Domestic Fight 2. Oh god, this is bad, but how about we give a listen to Domestic Fight? Yeah, I'm not playing any more of that. That is incredibly dark. Now thankfully, it's clear the audio is fake and edited, because why would there be 4 different versions of this, each sort of gradually building up to something worse? Plus, the audio from Baby Cry 02 is near identical to that from Domestic Fight 3. But it does raise the question of what the absolute hell is this doing here? So onto the third tier now, and let's begin with Mermaid in the Lake. Now it has been claimed that Courtney, the mermaid from the Freakshow, has a very small chance of spawning in the areas around Old Boar Vale. And weirdly enough, in her display you can actually see what looks like the shipwreck in the waters of Old Boar Vale, which if you head here, is actually where you can fight a pirate and unlock a secret pirate hat. Ivan and Ted's real inspiration. Now the characters of Ted Thompson, the jock leader, and Ivan Alexander, the non-clip student, might have some real life influence behind them. Ted Thompson is actually named after Ted Thompson, the professional American football player, who played for the Houston Oilers from 1975 to 1984, and was also manager of the Green Bay Packers from 2005 to 2017. This is a clear-cut inspiration, as Ted, the bully character, is shown to be a die-hard enthusiast of American football. As mentioned earlier, during development Ted's last name was originally Sinclair before Rockstar changed it to honour Ted Thompson. Now Ivan is slightly different, as he shares the exact same name as Ivan Alexander of Bulgaria, who ruled over Bulgaria from 1331 to 1371 when he died. Now I did some research on this Ivan Alexander of Bulgaria, but I couldn't find anything about his personality, so aside from the name there is very little inspirations between Ivan from Bully and Ivan of Bulgaria. So Ted Thompson has a real inspiration, Ivan's just a coincidence and nothing more than that. The nighttime negative influence. As soon as the clock strikes 1 AM, Jimmy suddenly becomes much more disoriented and tired, and the very second that clock strikes 2 AM, he collapses straight away. It's unknown what is wrong with Jimmy for him to just suddenly collapse dead on 2 AM, or why he suddenly starts getting all disoriented at a very specific time. Because of this, it's highly assumed that nighttime gives Jimmy some negative influence. Russell's psychological disease. If there's one thing that sticks about Russell Northrop, excluding his superhuman strength, it is his intelligence. He's not smart and he's heavily implied to be the oldest boy in the school, never graduated at all, instead being held back multiple years. And his intelligence is often implied to be very, very weak. Miss Danvers can often be heard calling him to the office and still having to give him directions, and he always speaks in third person. It's unknown if Russell was born like this or if he had an accident when he was younger to make him this way. The Werewolf. Began very shortly after Bully's original release on the PlayStation 2, where some players heard some very strange sounds that could be heard around the greasers and jocks areas. If you head down here during the night time, you can actually hear some howling. There were quite a lot of hints to actually back up the werewolf's existence, as players did more investigating around the map of Bullworth as this rumour first began developing. First of all, the howling. Now what makes this unusual is there's no animals to be seen around Bullworth, except for a dog and some crappy 2D bird PNGs. There are no other animals anywhere to be found in the game, there's like no cats or anything like it to appear. So this howling did give a good hint that maybe something was out there just waiting to be found. Now some people also believe that this could be a coyote, as they are quite native to the New England area, which is where Bully is actually set. Now, Happy Vault's Asylum also played a somewhat big role in this myth. As it has its own really creepy, unsettling mystery, Happy Vaults also seem to coincide with many other bloody myths, such as the Alien and of course our beloved Werewolf. For example, inside the Asylum, towards the back where you escape with Johnny Vincent, there's a rather mysterious wall of X-rays. Now these are definitely not human X-rays. Out of all of these however, this particular scan here seems to be the one that's widely accepted as the Werewolf scan. As we can see, it's hunched over in a somewhat bad way. We can also see the skull is definitely not a human skull, and the X-ray appears to have 4 eyes too. Also, some people believe that this stuff on the side, whatever it is, could actually be blood. The Ghost Girl. Now, it's rumoured that before Jimmy Hopkins arrived at Bulworth, a girl died and her spirit can be found either in the girls' dorm attic or the girls' locker room at the gym, late at night of course. The girl is unknown and her spirit can be seen or heard crying in the aforementioned places. But if Jimmy gets too close, her spirit will disappear, she can never be seen again, but the sound of her crying will remain. The Biology Classroom. Now, for some very strange and unexplained reason, if you somehow enter the biology class and go and look around, you'll notice that Dr. Slaughter has a decapitated human head in a jar. It's never explained how Dr. Slaughter came to possess this, or why Borth Academy is fine with putting on severed heads on display in a class for school children. It sounds like something the Islamic State would do. Secondly, as mentioned earlier, on Scholarship Edition, if you play the 2-player minigames in biology, you might end up coming across an alien to dissect. So what exactly is Dr. Slaughter hiding? And more importantly, why is he allowed to do that? Because I'm pretty sure the government would be very interested to find out where he's got these aliens from. So onto the 4th tier, and we'll begin with Jimmy is killed by Edgar. In Showdown at the Plant, there is a deleted portion of the mission where it's assumed Edgar Munson kills Jimmy by throwing him into acid during the boss fight if Jimmy loses. Because in the game's files there's a few unused files by Edgar where he says the following:
That burns, doesn't it? Nothing like a chemical your skin, huh, Jimmy? Poor little Jimmy taking an acid bath.
Now, while it could be assumed that this is possibly a deleted attack from Edgar where he throws something at Jimmy, there is something very interesting in an unused file which is much more damning. In the game's data files, specifically for this boss fight, there is an unused portion of code eerily named 5B, which is the mission ID for the Edgar boss fight. And one of the lines of code here is fall into sludge. Now, if you travel to these coordinates and the interior ID, they're exactly over the pit of acid where Jimmy and Edgar have their fight. Because of this, it's hardly assumed there was a deleted scene where Edgar kills Jimmy by throwing him into acid, but this was deleted entirely from the game because of how twisted and dark this entire scene would have been. And as I said in my 2016 video about this, it could have been a really creepy bad ending to the game if you think of it. Jimmy gets framed for all this stuff he never did, he tries so hard to clear his name and he ends up dead because of it, with his name still in the mud. The next one is Help Gary and the Hidden Meaning. Now this one, I'll admit I didn't actually know, so I just copied this one from the Reddit comment. Help Gary is a mission in chapter 1 where it's revealed that Gary doesn't like you and was only pretending to like you because he thought you, Jimmy, would help him take over the school. In this mission he asks you to help him to do something when in reality he was only bringing you to the hole to be smashed up by Russell. There are some people who say that this mission was actually meant to be a sincere plea for help from Gary so that Jimmy helps him out with psychological and family problems. During the events of the game, Gary cites his parents as being one of his problems. Miss Abby, a resident of New Coventry, speaks very poorly of Gary's mother, and Mr. Smith is suggested to be Gary's father since he shares the same surname and complains about the state of his family. Donald Anderson, one of the nerds, can be heard mentioning that Mr. Smith, referencing Gary's father, was kicked out of Borth Academy and he went to prison. If this is true in reference to Gary's father, it could explain Gary's behaviour. Towards the end of the game, several townsfolk make comments about Gary's bad behaviour and incredibly unstable personality. Gary admits he suffers from ADD, which is attention deficit disorder, and shows traits of narcissism and paranoia, often imagining he's in charge of a large empire. He was on behaviour medication but stopped taking it sometime around Halloween, 2 missions before Help Gary, which is what leads to his betrayal of Jimmy and Pete. The point is the mission title, Help Gary, and the real purpose of the mission was to really help Gary with his problems. But all of this is distorted to what we saw in the game in the opening seconds of the initial mission cutscene. The moment Gary decides he no longer wants Jimmy's help thanks to his narcissism and paranoia, and that he does want to betray Jimmy, is during the moments when he's sitting on the sofa in front of the TV shaking. The effects of bullying on Dan Wilson. Dan Wilson, one of the jocks, is once a nerd himself judging by his quotes, and he was bullied a lot. He has quite a lot of quotes saying that football defines his life, but does have a few other quotes on how he misses his nerd ways. Despite this, Dan shows no remorse in beating up other nerds, and it's believed that Ernest is one of his favourite victims. One of the quotes that he often says is, "I don't know why I beat up other kids, I just love it I guess." Dan Wilson gave up who he was just so he could become a jock and not get bullied anymore and take out his frustration on others. Zoe and Bif are brothers. Now first of all, they're not brothers because Zoe is a girl, unless she had gender reassignment surgery after the events of Bully, which considering we haven't got a sequel to, we're just going to stick with what we know, so let's cover the sibling theory nonetheless. Now it's rumoured that Bif Taylor and Zoe Taylor might actually be related on the account of them having the same surname of Taylor, both living in Bulworth and both having red hair. This might just be a coincidence. As mentioned earlier, during development Bif's last name was originally going to be Tremblay, not Taylor. There is a similar theory regarding Wade Martin, Christy Martin and Mr Martin, which is thrown around the community quite a bit too. Much like the Bif and Zoe theory, they also share the same last name, the same hair colour and live in the same town. If they all are related, it doesn't explain why Wade and Christy can sometimes be found making out. As far as I'm aware, New England is nowhere near Alabama. So onto the fifth tier now, and we've got Jimmy is James Earl Cash. Now once again, I didn't actually understand this one, so I've just copied the Reddit comment. This theory is based on the theory that Jimmy is James Earl Cash from Manhunt. Jimmy is a boy from a dysfunctional family. His mother does not care about him and only tries to satisfy herself with other men, while neglecting her son, sending him to whatever school she can. Jimmy is very aggressive, even in self-defense. He uses melee weapons like baseball bats and the like. Theorists claim that the result of a traumatic childhood, an unhappy and psychologically deficient adolescence ends up becoming a problematic adult, potentially sociopathic or psychopathic. While adolescent Jimmy beats to incapacitate his opponents, James Earl Cash flat out kills them. Making this connection between both characters, Jimmy is Bully's only true bully, and Jimmy would ultimately become a killer as an adult. This theory is kind of like those psychological assessments of adult psychopaths or sociopaths, where psychologists study the individual's past and see the small steps towards psychological disortation that would result in a disabled adult in the future. We see James Earl Cash as an adult, and you take Jimmy's adolescence in Bully. In view of the theorists, it's very likely that he, Jimmy, will become somebody who will become dysfunctional in the future. Bully, Manhunt, Grand Theft Auto do take place in the same universe. All of these games are from Rockstar. In the case of Bully and Manhunt, both protagonists are called James, and I'm not affirming anything, that James is Jimmy, and therefore the only real Bully from Bully. Not gonna lie, that doesn't make any sense to me, but okay. On to the next one. The Faculty is a satanic cult. Now, anybody who's played Bully knows just how insanely creepy and mysterious the Insane Asylum is. The entire game is light-hearted comedy, but the second you set foot inside this place, the happy comedic theme gets thrown out the window, and we have one of the most unsettling places in a Rockstar game. Now, one of the major theories for the Asylum is it's the front for a cult, and we do have a bit of evidence to support this theory. Now, in the mission Galloway Away, upon gaining access to the Asylum, one of the inmates runs up to you and says something along the lines of, "Let's be friends, but don't anger the Watcher," before the camera cuts to the statue. Now, this statue itself is a bit eerie too, as the statue is doing a pose which is something we typically see in a religious sense, and the statue is dressed in a robe, which is also something that's very commonplace in religious iconography. Upon damaging the statue's power source to distract the orderlies, Theo can actually be heard saying about how there's another Watcher stampede. Now, the inmate Otto's quote about not angering the Watcher definitely implies that this statue is some kind of god or other omnipotent being. The fact the orderlies acknowledge that this is the Watcher hints that something is up. Now, unlike other authority figures, the orderlies of the Asylum are the only ones who actively drug anybody they see out of line. They just inject something into the neck which causes a person to faint near instantly, even Jimmy if he gets caught by them, so it shows they do not care who they drug, child or adult. And if you read up any cult stories about this, many of them do not hesitate to punish children in the same brutal and cruel ways as they do to adults. And if you want to get really far-fetched with this theory, we could take a look at Mr. Galloway when he's been incarcerated by them. When we find Mr. Galloway, not only is he in a really bad state, but he's muttering to himself how he must be a better person and how he's really pathetic when he sees Jimmy, before he quickly cowers away in fear and seems to shout a bit because he assumes that Jimmy is an orderly before calming down when he recognises him. Now, the reason I say this is because cults are known to make members view themselves as pathetic and worthless as a form of manipulation to keep them under the cult's thumb. And since Mr. Galloway is there against his will, it makes a lot of sense as to why he quickly cowers in fear upon assuming an orderly is at his cell. Purgatory. Now, it's assumed that straight after the fall and final showdown, Jimmy Hopkins actually died and everything that takes place afterwards is either in Purgatory or Heaven. It's assumed that straight after the fall and final showdown, Jimmy Hopkins actually died and everything that takes place afterwards is in Purgatory. Now, there are various different beliefs in Purgatory in general, with some believing that in Purgatory you're either not good enough for Heaven or Hell, or it's a waiting room with the other souls while you wait to discover your fate. However, some others believe that you may have died, but you're not aware of it yet. but your soul continues to live on in this weird place that strongly resembles where you lived to prevent you from realising that you've died. Now in the case for Jimmy's death, this one does have a bit of info backing it up. Jimmy and Gary both fell from the same height, yet in the next scene, Jimmy is perfectly fine, completely unscathed, while Gary is the only one who is seemingly hurt. As soon as Jimmy steps outside the academy, he's incredibly popular, nobody hates him anymore, and the girl he loved runs up to him and kisses him. Another interesting note as well is the final showdown fight takes place at night, but when Jimmy steps outside, it's daytime again. After the credits roll, we're introduced to End the Summer, where Jimmy essentially lives out the same 5 days over and over and over again. The weather never changes, and no one's attitude towards Jimmy ever changes anymore, and his parents never arrive to pick him up. Now as mentioned earlier, one of the beliefs of Purgatory is you're not good enough for heaven, or bad enough to enter hell, and as we progress through Bully, Jimmy does fit perfectly. He does stand up for the bullied, and he offers to help out many people out of his own will. But at the same time, Jimmy enacts revenge on those who wronged him for very little reason. He assaults people, bullies people, and vandalises people's property, etc. And another theory is that this could be heaven. Now while most people tend to think of heaven as pearly white gates, God and Jesus and a place full of other past loved ones, some theories believe that Jimmy's in heaven following his fall, which is why he's no longer hated by everybody. His love comes up to him and kisses him, and it's why everything is now at peace and Jimmy's living the good life as he puts it. Jimmy is dead and in his own definition of heaven, which also explains why we never see the rights being broken up or know what happened to Gary, Russell, Edgar from the last time we saw them, etc. And finally, the Lost Mission. Back in the early 2010s, a member of Bully Board named Madman claimed to have known a Rockstar insider who gave him information on the original ending that was planned for Bully, and what Madman said was Gary Smith was originally planned to die, and the final showdown mission that we got went through numerous changes before Rockstar decided on the final version. Initially this theory didn't have much weight behind it other than being a beta rumour, but in 2017 and 2018 there were some discoveries made that gave a possibility to Gary's death being true. Now the first part came in the form of the soundtrack. Now strangely, in the game's files there was at least 3 versions of Final Showdown's music that was made. Final Showdown's first track is still used in the mission Rats in the Library, but the second track was cut entirely, and the third track, named MS Final Showdown 03, is the one we hear in the final game. Now this is solid evidence to support Madman's claims of Final Showdown having multiple versions. Now the 2018 findings however gave a lot more credit to their death. Now in the beta, there were 7 chapters to the game, but it was cut down to 6. Now at first people assumed this was because chapter 6 was initially just 3 missions, which was go see the principal, which is just a cutscene, complete mayhem, and Final Showdown, and it was far too short to warrant being its own chapter, so it was merged with chapter 5 instead, which is understandable. But Bunny modder Deadpool XYZ was searching for mission markers, and he found the only remains of the 7th chapter and 2 mission markers. Now the first mission marker, known as 7_01, would have been the first mission of the chapter, and it would have taken place at the Preppy's Beach Clubhouse. 7_02 doesn't exist however, but 7_03 does, and it would have taken place in the Bourth Cemetery next to the church. Now because of this, some people assume that this was the 7th chapter following on from the events of Gary's death, and the 3rd mission may have had something to do with Jimmy facing Gary's grave, which, given all the info we know of Beta Bully in general, it's not far-fetched to believe the game would have been as dark as to deal with death in the epilogue. So thank you for watching the Bully Iceberg mystery, or the Bully Mystery Mega Marathon, whichever you want to call it. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.